Good evening, everybody. This is Tony Hain Shipkowski for ACTE 630.50A with Dr. Dreon, my Module 7 poster. I'm just going to get started and dive right in. The first thing that we were asked to discuss today was our philosophy of education and our role in the classroom, whether it's online or in brick and mortar. And in my opinion, education is important for all. It is the foundation to success in our ever-changing world. Many people Anybody can't get to where they're at right now without education, some form of education in something. Online education, as we saw with the videos from Lesson 2, opened the doors for many students who have disabilities or some type of circumstance that requires them to miss a lot of brick and mortar instruction. Personal experience from PA Cyber and Northern Lebanon, sometimes students need to leave the brick and mortar classrooms, like Natalie Westling from the YouTube videos we watched, who had a medical condition and wasn't accommodated for, missed a lot of school, and required a better situation for their education. Online education also allows for the flexibility it gives students who have daily interruptions for whatever reason. It helps them achieve academically. My role as an educator, I think I'm a purveyor of information, but most importantly, a guide. I feel as an educator, I am there to give instruction and the basics, give the tools for success, and then have my students use them on assignments to develop the skills with that tool. In our Rice book, she calls this the guide on the side on page 76. A student-centered environment gives the students the floor, so to speak, having them develop the tools through exploratory activities and assignments. She also discusses the role of an online teacher as an instructor and a group process facilitator on pages 76 and 77. As a teacher, it is my obligation to give my students the tools for success and instruct them on how to use those tools. Excuse me. I'm also there to facilitate in all parts of the lesson, not just direct instruction, but helping group work, tech help, communication, and so on. Prensky 2005 says teachers should keep doing what they do best, leading discussion in their classroom. While teachers should drive the discussion initially, after the basics are taught, the students should be able to take the information and develop it on their own, or give them the floor during the lesson. I would do this through activities that allow students to take the information and work with it, whether it's on an assignment immediately in class or a prolonged assignment that may take a few days. Dickers, Whiteside, and Lewis, in their article that studied the social presence model, the instructor involvement is the most important part of online educators for teachers and the students. As a teacher, I want and need to be involved in the instruction, but also assist students as needed when they are working independently or collaboratively. For my unit of instruction, briefly to describe that, in my algebra class, any unit or chapter that I teach now in brick and mortar, I think lends itself pretty easily to online instruction. I could present the material like I am right now to you on a website like Scribbler or Twidla, the other website that I reviewed back in a previous lesson, where you can present information. It also gives you a whiteboard like this does right here, and you can draw a little over it. There's number 8, my favorite number, or one of my favorite numbers. For this example, I would use my chapter or unit on solving single variable equations. Lesson 1 is solving one-step linear equations, a very basic problem or problems that only need one or very simple two-step to solve, and it focuses on the final step of a multi-step equation, which is to divide or multiply to get the variable by itself. Lesson 2 is solving multi-step linear equations. Lesson 3 is solving equations with variables on both sides. And Lesson 4 is solving proportions with cross product. Lessons 2 through 4 all involve a set of steps that students can follow, with Lesson 4 an added step at the beginning, or a step 1A, if you will. Where 1A is cross multiply, then 1B would be distribute to get rid of parentheses. Step 2, combine like terms. Step 3, get variable to one side. We only use that in Lessons 3 and 4. Step 4 would be add or subtract, and Step 5 would be multiply or divide. I believe these lessons lend themselves nicely to the use of synchronous and asynchronous communication, especially for collaboration. For asynchronous and synchronous communication, direct discussion and introduction, I believe every lesson should start off with some type of activation of prior knowledge discussed in many of our readings. This could be a quick problem displayed on a virtual whiteboard, and done with a thumbs up, thumbs down, emoticon, text chat reply, like you can see over here. On the one side of this screen would be there is ability for text and voice chat on this website as well. I would use this to help have students participate, although when there is the text chat, it does allow students to cheat to find the answer briefly. Following the icebreaker, I would show an example in real time to give the basic idea of the lesson. Following these steps, I could do a couple of things with synchronous communication or asynchronous in either collaborative groups or individually. Synchronous communication, I would use direct discussion as mentioned above. I would instruct my students in the lesson 1 on how to get rid of the numbers using the opposite operation. Or in lesson 3, here's what I did first. Now what do you think I could do based on what we did in lessons 1 and 2? Breakout rooms, like the math teacher in the video we watched before, will allow students to come up with the steps to be used in lessons 2 through 4, or work on problems together to help each other correct mistakes or answer any questions. It doesn't necessarily have to be done in breakout rooms. I could also do that in my direct instruction with a class collectively in case there's a very common misconception. In the breakout rooms, going back to those, they can do many things like agree on steps to follow to answer questions, which would work great in my lessons 2 through 4. I could give them a prompt of, okay, here's what we learned yesterday, but now I have this being added to the problem, or we start off with parentheses. In your breakout room, I want you to come up with the next step or even solve the problem, but your goal is to come up with the steps, not necessarily just the answer. I can also group students in breakout rooms on review days or work days in ways that has 1 or 2 stronger students working with students who may not be as confident or struggling, which helps create a sense of community and student leadership, which many of our articles discussed in the readings. This is in line with INACOL Standard F that reads, online teachers know and understand that students have varied talents and skills, make appropriate accommodations. INACOL Standard B also discusses the need for teachers to understand the need and importance of interaction in an online course and the role of varied communication tools. Kostinsky also notes the importance of synchronous communication because we answer questions in real time. In breakout rooms, students can discuss and answer problems in real time, help each other out, and communicate tools or videos that they found that help them understand in case I'm not available, which was what Rice discusses on page 35 in her book. Rice also on pages 145 and 146 also discusses Bloom's digital taxonomy and the different ways to meet the different learning styles. If I give my students the ability in small groups or individually to come up with steps to solve equations, not only am I fostering that student-centered environment, I'm also giving them a chance for exploration to see what works, test things out, try things out, and so on. Students in lessons 2 through 4 for my unit can also explore how to solve multi-step equations by trying different steps out first, assessing each other's ideas, and giving each other quality feedback. On the downside, Hostinsky in his article does discuss the inability for in-depth discussion to occur because of time constraints, and important information may be missed, or not all students are able to give quality input due to time constraints. Some students may also be too shy to be able to participate, whether that be just due to their social abilities or a learning disability. In discussing asynchronous communication, to help avoid the limitations of synchronous communications that I just mentioned, I can include the use of forums, discussion pages, or emails messaging to help accommodate for students who feel less confident in their abilities, whether it be due to low confidence or a learning disability. For the use of forums and discussion pages, I can post a group or individual steps from the breakout rooms, keeping them anonymous, of course, and from lessons 2, 3, or 4, and have students respond to what they think those students came up with that worked well, or what didn't work so well, and what should be changed or added. I can keep those posts private for a time to ensure all students answer and assess for accuracy, then have an open floor forum that allows for self or peer assessment. This eliminates the fear of judgment from peers before I open the floor to an open floor forum. The students can also have a student-led help page where they can ask for help or post tools found elsewhere online like Khan Academy videos, which I use sometimes, which also goes back to Rice on page 35. Hostinsky also does mention the limitations of asynchronous communication based on class size. If a class is smaller, even given more time to assess, think about, and discuss a prompt, the lower number of participants lessens the amount of quality input. However, given a larger class, the assistance may be more fruitful. Students who are shy or have a learning disability or impairment that prohibit them from feeling confident in speaking in synchronous communications now have a way of communicating with me, their peers, and giving input when necessary. In regards to both synchronous and asynchronous communication, there needs to be rules and guidelines for participation, which is what Rice talks about on pages 150 through 155. I would keep track of all the recorded lessons for documentation purposes if swearing or vulgar language is used or bullying. I also need to have a schedule for expected responses and their due dates, clearly articulate the purpose and expectations for these reflections, and set a minimum for amount of communications in a week. And I must be present to hinder and monitor breakout rooms and forums for any issues or synchronous communications for any bullying, swearing, and so on, like I mentioned. Another thing I want to talk about briefly, and I'm not quite sure if we had to do this or not, but I want to talk about accommodations, especially the UDL and web accessibility guidelines that we just talked about a week or so ago. UDL standards 1.1 through 1.3 all discuss the use of visuals, images, graphics, etc. in the administration of content. They need to be in a flexible format for text, images, graphics, etc. that can be modified for or by the students so they can see more clearly, enlarge small text or graphics, or have a description of a picture in a class presentation. That also goes along with the web accessibility guidelines. UDL Standard 2.5 talks about alternate display methods and can an image be described thoroughly for visually impaired? Going back to that alt text web accessibility guideline. Is there a voiceover option or closed captioning for hard of hearing students or students that can't hear so they can read what is being spoken? That's also a web accessibility guideline. I can post presentations prior to the class so they can be modified prior to the lesson, or post the recordings of classes to help the students who are visually impaired or hearing impaired. Not to mention those that are absent. 3.2, UDL Standard 3.2, the use of graphic organizers, lists, etc. to highlight whether being followed in class or used after to help mathematic problems that follow a sequential order. I already do that. I have my students record those in their notes in my brick and mortar class. UDL Standard 4.2, assistive technologies. This may be hindered in an online school by the availability of tech. However, there are alternate technologies out there that are accessible on the internet or already programmed into a computer, like text-to-speech programs. 5.1 through 5.3 discuss is the use of different methods to explore learning or strategies to solve problems, tools provided like calculators or sketchpads for mathematics, different ways of modeling. I can use different strategies in breakout rooms, especially if broken down by learning disabilities, to help assist students who do not understand or learn in a different way. 6.2 and 6.3 of the UDL standards, checklist prompts to stop and think, explain, and checklists for guides for note-taking. I already use checklists and lists to follow when solving a problem, and or notes that I use at Lebanon are already guided. 7.3, class routines and varying of work sessions. I follow the same setup every lesson. It follows the same set like I mentioned before. And varying of work sessions, this time I only want you to focus on these. And this other time I want you to focus on these problems. And lastly, 8.2 and 8.4 for UDL, alternate tools and scaffolds to help success and differentiate the degree of difficulty, frequent and specific feedback to help the student's ability of self-assessment and correction. This can be achieved in small groups or individually in the synchronous learning portion. Just real quick, again, to touch on the web accessibility guidelines. I'm going to create a very short video after this for my last two slides. In utilizing PowerPoint and notebook presentations and online services like Scribbler or Twidla, which is Scribbler is what I'm using right now. They have the recording capabilities. I can post those on line for closed captioning and video captioning for hard of hearing and visually impaired students. Word and PowerPoint documents can be posted prior to the lesson and printed off for guides to the lesson, an outline view, or slide layout. And then they can also use the mathematical tools in Word that allow them to create or write their own equations. I'm going to finish up my last two slides here in a separate, quick 2-minute video.